Nestled in the crook of a winding river, surrounded by tall raffia palms and endless savanna grasslands, lay the ancient village of Nyambele. It was a place few outsiders ever saw, and even fewer understood. For Nyambele was not just an ordinary settlement of mud huts and thatched roofs. It was a community that lived under the watchful gaze of the crocodile. The river, known as Obanzu, stretched wide and deep, moving with a silence that seemed alive. The people of Nyambele never referred to it as just a river. They called it the living blood, for within its depths resided their protector, their deity, and their eternal covenant, the great crocodile spirit known as Korongwe. From the time of their ancestors, the people of Nyambele believed the crocodile was no mere beast. It was the river's voice, the guardian of justice, and the shield that kept enemies away. Unlike other villages where crocodiles were feared and hunted, here they were worshipped, spoken to, and respected as kinsfolk. Children grew up learning the language of the crocodile, a series of guttural clicks, throat sounds, and whistles that mimicked the creature's growl. It was said that a true child of Nyambele could call a crocodile from the water with just a few words. Life in Nyambele revolved around this sacred bond. At dawn, women went to the river to fetch water, kneeling by the banks, whispering greetings in the crocodile tongue. Fishermen set out in canoes, never casting their nets without first giving an offering of palm oil on the water's surface. Hunters, before venturing into the forest, touched the mud of the riverbank to their foreheads, asking Korongwe to watch their families in their absence. At the heart of the village stood the crocodile shrine, a low circular hut built with sacred clay. Inside, the elders kept carved wooden effigies of crocodiles, polished smooth by generations of hands. Animal skins, gourds of palm wine, cowries, and iron staffs leaned against the walls, all symbols of their devotion. And at the shrine's center was a great stone, black and shiny, believed to have fallen from the sky on the night the first covenant was made. On that stone, the first ancestor of Nyambele had sworn loyalty to the crocodile, and in return, the spirit of the waters vowed protection over the village. The people of Nyambele prospered because of this covenant. While neighboring villages suffered raids from slavers in the old days, Nyambele remained untouched. While droughts and famine ravaged other lands, the river always yielded fish for the children of Korongwe. No wild beast dared cross the riverbank into the village at night, for the glinting eyes of crocodiles patrolled the waters like silent soldiers. Yet it was not all without fear, for the crocodile's protection was not blind. It came with laws, sacred taboos that could not be broken. No one in Nyambele was permitted to kill or harm a crocodile, even in self-defense. No one dared pollute the river with blood, filth, or disrespect. And above all, no villager could betray the covenant by mocking the crocodile tongue, for to do so was to mock the spirit itself. The elders often told stories by moonlight, warning the young ones. Korongwe is gentle to those who honor him, but merciless to those who mock him. The river remembers, and the crocodile never forgets. On one such evening, under the glowing full moon, the village gathered in the square. Drums echoed and fires burned brightly. Old Elder Wokiri, the keeper of the shrine, leaned on his staff as he spoke. "My children," he began, his voice rough like dry leaves, "you see the peace we enjoy, the safety we walk in. It is not by our strength, it is not by our spears, it is by the teeth of Korongwe. His eyes watch us when we sleep, his jaws open against our enemies. But remember this, when the river grows silent, it is not peace but warning. Listen always, for the crocodile speaks." The children huddled closer, their eyes wide, while the adults nodded solemnly. The fire crackled, and in the distance, from the river's dark belly, came the low growl of a crocodile. The sound rolled across the village like thunder. Everyone fell silent. They bowed their heads, whispering in unison, "Korongwe, we hear you." That night, as the village slept, a shadow moved along the riverbank. Something, or someone, not of Nyambele, had entered their sacred ground. The crocodile's growl had not been for nothing. Long before the present generation of Nyambele, long before the huts were built where they now stood, the river had flowed in silence, unclaimed and unguarded. The people of those ancient days lived in scattered groups, fearful of beasts, raiders, and hunger. They had no protector, no shield against the cruelty of the earth. It was in that time of despair that the legend of the covenant was born. The elders told it often by firelight, of a man named Obaturu, the first ancestor of Nyambele. He was said to have been both hunter and wanderer, a man searching for a place his children could call home. With only his spear and his faith in the spirits, he journeyed for many seasons, moving from dry plains to thick forests until he came upon the wide, deep river. On the night he arrived, Obaturu was weak with hunger. He knelt by the water's edge to drink, and in the moonlight he saw two fiery eyes staring back at him. From the river rose the great crocodile, massive as no beast he had ever seen, its scales glistening like wet bronze. Obaturu did not run. Instead, he bowed low and spoke. "I am a man without a home. If you are spirit, if you are master of this water, take me as your child, and I will take you as my father. Protect my blood, and I will protect your name." The crocodile circled him in the water, then lifted its head and growled a sound that shook the reeds. At that moment, Obaturu knew he had been answered. The covenant was sealed when Obaturu cut his palm with a sharp stone and let his blood fall into the water. The crocodile opened its jaws and swallowed the blood-stained water, binding man and beast in an eternal oath. From then on, Obaturu and his descendants were no longer wanderers. They built their homes by the riverbank, calling the place Nyambele, the resting ground. They were no longer prey to wild beasts, for crocodiles filled the waters in countless numbers, yet never harmed them. When enemies came to raid, canoes filled with warriors were overturned in the river by unseen jaws. When drought struck other lands, Obanzu never dried, and the people always had fish and water. The elders claimed that the first shrine was built on the very spot where Obaturu had made his vow. The black stone at the shrine's center was believed to be the very stone upon which his blood had dripped, and each generation renewed the covenant through rituals of respect and offerings, cola nuts, palm wine, and sometimes goats or chickens given to the waters. But the covenant was not without law. The crocodile's spirit, Korongwe, demanded 3 sacred commandments. 1. The river is life. Never defile it with waste or human blood. 2. The crocodile is kin. Never harm or mock it, for its spirit is your protector. 3. The covenant is eternal. Betray it, and the living blood will rise against you. These words were carved on wooden tablets kept inside the shrine, guarded by the shrine keeper. As Elder Wokiri always reminded the children, this covenant is older than my father, older than his father, older than the very huts you sleep in. It is not story, it is our backbone. Without it, we are like dust scattered by the wind. That night, after the growl echoed from the river, Elder Wokiri lingered outside his hut, staring into the darkness. His old bones remembered things that the younger ones did not. A crocodile's growl in the middle of the night was no small matter. It was not a hunting call. It was not a warning to animals. It was a voice, a spirit's voice, and Wokiri feared what it might mean. Morning in Nyambele always began with the river. At the first light of dawn, before the sun broke over the tall raffia palms, the village stirred awake to the sound of women's voices by the riverbank. They knelt in rows, their clay pots beside them, humming in low tones as they fetched water. The melody was not random. It was the song of greeting, a traditional chant meant for the crocodiles that guarded the living blood. The song flowed like water itself, deep, slow, and rhythmic. As the women sang, small ripples stirred on the surface of the river. Here and there, the snout of a crocodile rose, nostrils flaring, eyes half submerged. The creatures drifted close but never attacked. Instead, they floated lazily, as though listening to the hymn. "Good morning, Korongwe," the women whispered in the crocodile tongue between verses. "Good morning, our father of teeth and scales. Drink our words and give us peace." By the time the women balanced their pots on their heads and walked back to the village, the sun had risen, bathing the huts in gold. Children ran barefoot across the dust, chasing one another and mimicking the guttural croaks of crocodiles. The children of Nyambele did not learn their language from scrolls or chalkboards. Instead, they learned it from the river itself. By the age of 5, every boy and girl could click their tongue, hum from their throats, and whistle in ways that echoed the crocodile's call. It was said that those who spoke it best could summon a crocodile to the riverbank and watch it obey like a trained dog. One such boy was Amari, the grandson of Elder Wokiri, slim, quick-footed, with eyes that seemed always to sparkle. Amari had been gifted with a natural tongue for the crocodile speech. At just 9 years old, he could call out and make the river's surface stir. Other children envied him, but they also admired him, for in Nyambele, to speak well to the crocodiles was a blessing as great as hunting prowess or beauty. This morning, Amari crouched by the river with a group of children. His little sister Zira clung to his side, wide-eyed. The people of Nyambele rarely saw strangers. Their village lay hidden behind miles of grassland, protected by the winding river and thick forests. Outsiders feared the crocodile-filled waters, and the few who attempted to cross were said to have vanished beneath the waves. But fate has a way of pushing even the unwelcome into forbidden places. It was during the heat of midday, when the women were weaving mats under the shade and the men were mending fishing nets, that a stranger appeared at the edge of the village. Dusty, tall, and lean, he carried a leather bag slung across his back and a long staff in his hand. His clothes were strange, not raffia or homespun, but cotton dyed in bright reds and blues, like those worn by traders from far-off lands. The first to notice him were the children. They screamed and ran toward the village square, shouting, "Oyibo! Oyibo! Stranger! Stranger!" Men dropped their work and reached for their spears. Women pulled their little ones closer. Visitors were not forbidden, but they were always watched carefully. The stranger walked with a calm, confident step. When he reached the center of the village, he bowed slightly and spoke in a clear, deep voice. "I greet you, people of Nyambele. My name is Okoro, a trader from the north. I have walked many days searching for a safe path to the coast. My feet led me here, to your river." His words were respectful, yet something in his tone carried a weight of arrogance, as though he did not quite believe in the awe that surrounded Nyambele. The elders gathered quickly. Elder Wokiri leaned on his staff, eyes narrowing as he studied the newcomer. "Few men find this village by chance," he said slowly. "Tell us, Okoro of the North, what do you seek here?" Okoro smiled faintly. "I seek passage and perhaps trade. I have goods, salt, beads, iron tools. In return, I wish for food and a place to rest. And," he paused, his eyes glinting, "I have heard stories of your river. They say you worship crocodiles. I wish to see if such tales are true." A ripple of unease passed through the villagers. No outsider had spoken so boldly of their covenant. Elder Wokiri's grip tightened on his staff. "The river is not a tale. It is our life. Outsiders may rest here, but their tongues must be careful. To mock the living blood is to invite death." Okoro chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Death? From crocodiles? Old man, I have crossed rivers wider than this. I have hunted lions and fought men twice my size. Crocodiles are but animals. If they frighten you, it is because you do not know their weakness." Gasps broke from the crowd. Women covered their mouths and men muttered angrily. Children clung to their mothers, their wide eyes darting toward the river, as though Korongwe might rise at any moment to punish the insult. Amari, standing near the back with his sister Zira, felt a chill creep up his spine. He whispered, "The river is listening." Elder Wokiri's voice thundered across the square. "Be silent, stranger. Speak not of weakness where there is strength. You walk on sacred ground, and your tongue drips with danger. If you remain among us, you will honor our covenant, or the river will judge you itself." For the first time, Okoro's smile faded. He bowed again, but his eyes still gleamed with disbelief. That night, while the villagers prepared for the Feast of the Living Blood, Okoro sat in the shadows watching. He saw how the people carried food to the shrine, how they bowed to the water, how they sang in strange guttural tones. He saw children imitating crocodiles and grown men whispering greetings to the river before they cast their nets, and he laughed quietly to himself. "Fools," he muttered, "praying to beasts. I will show them the truth." But the river, silent and dark, heard his words, and somewhere beneath the water, Korongwe stirred. The moon rose heavy and pale, casting silver light across the roofs of Nyambele. The village lay quiet after a long day of preparations for the Feast of the Living Blood. Drums had fallen silent, goats tethered near the shrine bleated softly, and the only sounds were the rustling of palms and the endless whisper of the river. But deep in the darkness, the river stirred. Amari, who could never sleep easily on festival nights, lay awake on his mat. Zira slept soundly beside him, but his ears twitched at every sound. He felt something was wrong, though he couldn't name it. When the low growl rolled across the night, vibrating through the walls of the hut, he sat up instantly. Koro Nungwe, he whispered. It was not unusual for crocodiles to call at night, but this sound was different, longer, deeper, a growl that trembled in the marrow of the bones. The entire village seemed to hear it. Dogs whined and hid in corners. Chickens rustled nervously in their cages, and even the tethered goats near the shrine fell silent, ears twitching in fear. Amari slipped outside, bare feet in the dust. The air was heavy, as though the river exhaled its breath over the land. Shadows shifted near the bank, where the moonlight revealed ripples spreading across the water. From the darkness, multiple crocodile heads broke the surface. Not one, not two, but a dozen, their eyes glowing like embers. They floated close together, forming a silent wall of scales and teeth. Elder Wokiri was already there, leaning on his staff, his face pale in the moonlight. Other villagers crept from their huts, whispering prayers in the crocodile tongue. The river speaks tonight, Wokiri murmured, but it is not the voice of peace. Suddenly, a sharp sound split the air, the voice of Okoro, the outsider. He had wandered to the bank, his silhouette tall against the moonlit water. What foolishness is this? He laughed. A gathering of animals, and you tremble as though gods stand before you. Watch, I will show you that these beasts are nothing. Before anyone could stop him, he picked up a stone and hurled it into the river. It splashed dangerously close to the crocodiles. A gasp tore from the villagers. Some women wailed, clutching their heads. Amari grabbed Zira's hand, dragging her back into the shadows. The crocodiles did not scatter. They did not retreat. Instead, they growled in unison, a terrible rumbling chorus that shook the air. The water churned violently, waves crashing against the bank, as though a storm raged beneath the surface. Elder Wokiri raised his staff high. His voice thundered, Okoro, you have mocked the living blood. The covenant does not forgive. But Okoro only sneered. Old man, I fear no water and no beast. If your crocodile god wishes to punish me, let him come and try. At that moment, a single crocodile surged from the water, its body massive, its jaws wide enough to swallow a goat whole. It slammed against the riverbank, its growl so loud the villagers fell to their knees. Amari's heart pounded. He knew without question that this was not just any crocodile. This was Korongwe, the guardian, the spirit, the god of their river. Okoro stumbled back, fear flickering across his face for the first time. But before the beast could strike, Elder Wokiri lifted both hands and cried out in the crocodile tongue, a desperate chant of appeasement. The great crocodile halted, its eyes burning with intelligence beyond any animal. Slowly it slid back into the water, leaving only ripples. The others followed, vanishing beneath the surface as though they had never been there. The river grew silent again. The villagers trembled in awe. Some wept, others fell to the ground in worship. Elder Wokiri turned to Okoro, his eyes blazing. You are alive tonight only because Korongwe has given mercy. But mark my words, stranger, mercy does not come twice. The river has warned us. If you mock it again, not even I will speak for you. Okoro said nothing. His pride kept his mouth shut, but his eyes darted nervously to the dark water. Amari, clutching Zira's hand, whispered to himself, The river has spoken. Something is coming. And in the silence that followed, the village of Nyambele knew one truth. The covenant was watching, and its patience was thin. The morning after the warning was heavy with unease. The sun rose red over the river, its reflection shimmering like spilled blood upon the water. No laughter rang from the children. No songs rose from the women at the riverbank. Even the drums, usually beating at dawn in preparation for the feast, lay silent. The villagers whispered among themselves, casting wary glances at the outsider, Okoro. Some argued he should be driven out immediately. Others feared that sending him away might anger Korongwe further. Elder Wokiri, weary but resolute, declared that until the feast was completed, the stranger would remain under watch. "Let the crocodile spirit himself decide his fate," Wokiri said. But while the people trembled at the stranger's arrogance, they did not see that danger was already brewing within their own ranks. That afternoon, a young man named Kuma, one of the fishermen, sat alone at the riverbank. Kuma had always been restless, envious of those who had gifts the river seemed to bless. He envied hunters who returned with game, women whose voices carried beauty and song, and especially children like Amari, who could speak the crocodile tongue with ease. Kuma had tried for years, but no matter how he clicked, growled, or whistled, the crocodiles never responded. To him, they floated like indifferent logs, ignoring his existence. He spat into the water bitterly. "Guardians, bah," he muttered. "We feed them, honor them, and yet they do nothing for me? What use is a god who chooses some and rejects others?" As if in answer, a fish leapt from the river, its silver body flashing before it fell back with a splash. Kuma's eyes narrowed. Hunger gnawed at him. His nets had been empty for days. "Why should I starve while others feast?" he hissed. The law was clear. No villager could cast a net without first giving offering to the river. But Kuma, blinded by anger, ignored the rule. He grabbed his spear, waded knee-deep into the shallows, and waited. A ripple passed across the water. Something stirred beneath the surface. Large, heavy. Kuma froze, fear prickling at his neck. For a moment he thought of retreating, but then he remembered the mocking laughter of the other men when his nets came back empty. His shame hardened into defiance. "If the river will not feed me," he whispered, "I will take for myself." With a swift motion, he thrust his spear downward. The water churned red. For an instant, triumph filled him, until the truth emerged. It was not a fish he had struck. The spear had pierced the side of a young crocodile, no larger than a goat. The creature thrashed wildly, its guttural cries carrying across the water. Blood spiraled into the current, staining the sacred river. Kuma's heart stopped. His spear slipped from his hands. He stumbled backward onto the bank, trembling. The villagers came running, drawn by the creature's cries. They saw the wounded crocodile dragging itself weakly toward the depths, blood flowing from its flank. Horror spread across their faces. Women wailed. Children clung to their mothers. Elder Wokiri pushed through the crowd, his old eyes blazing with fury. "Who has done this?" he demanded. Kuma fell to his knees, stammering. I did not mean, it was mistake. I thought it was fish." "Silence." Wokiri's staff struck the ground. "You have broken the covenant. You have spilled crocodile blood in the living river." A terrible stillness fell over the bank. All eyes turned to the water. The ripples were no longer gentle. They swelled and spread outward as though something massive moved beneath. Then came the growl. Deep, earth-shaking, it rolled from the depths of the river like thunder. Dozens of crocodile heads surfaced, eyes burning with a furious light. They formed a circle in the water, their jaws snapping, their tails thrashing. The wounded young one was taken gently into their midst, then pulled below. The river foamed red, and silence returned. Wokiri raised his arms toward the sky, his voice breaking. "Korongwe has been defiled, his covenant broken. The feast must become atonement, or the river will devour us all." The villagers fell to their knees, chanting prayers, begging forgiveness. But deep inside, fear gnawed at every heart. For the first time in generations, crocodile blood had touched the living river, and everyone knew, the crocodile never forgets. That night, Nyambele did not sleep. Fear sat heavy in every hut like an uninvited guest. Mothers clutched their children, whispering prayers into the darkness. Men sat with spears across their laps, though they knew no weapon could protect them from what lurked in the river. The crocodile's growl from earlier still echoed in their bones. It had not been the growl of warning as before. It was the growl of judgment. Elder Wokiri summoned the council to the shrine. The black stone at the center gleamed faintly in the firelight, as though soaked in unseen light. Around it lay offerings, hastily gathered, calabashes of palm wine, cola nuts, smoked fish, and woven mats. But Wokiri's voice trembled when he spoke. "The covenant is broken," he said. "Kuma has spilled blood into the living river. The crocodile has been wounded by the hand of one of its children. This is no small matter. The spirit will not ignore such an insult." The chiefs murmured anxiously. One chief, Dalo, banged his staff. "Then give Kuma to the river. Let him be the sacrifice to cleanse the covenant." Gasps broke around the shrine. Kuma, tied and trembling in the corner, cried out, "No, I did not mean it. I swear it was mistake." But Wokiri shook his head. "It is not for us to decide. Korongwe himself will demand what must be done." At midnight, the river began to rise. At first, it was only a soft lapping at the banks, like an ordinary flood. But soon the waters swelled higher, swallowing the reeds, creeping into the paths, licking at the edges of the huts. Crocodile heads surfaced everywhere, tens, then hundreds, their eyes glowing in the moonlight. The villagers gathered in the square, terrified, clutching one another as the living river surged. And then it happened. From the middle of the river erupted a colossal wave, taller than the tallest palm. It crashed against the far bank, uprooting trees and sweeping them away like twigs. The earth shook. Thunder cracked across the sky, though no storm clouds had gathered. The great crocodile, Korongwe himself, rose from the depths. His body was massive, larger than any boat, his scales glistening like bronze armor. His jaws opened wide, and the sound that came forth was not merely a growl. It was a voice, deep, ancient, terrible. Every villager fell to the ground, faces pressed to the earth. Even Okoro, the outsider, stumbled back in awe, his arrogance stripped away by sheer terror. "Korongwe," Elder Wokiri whispered, trembling. "The covenant lives. He has come." The great crocodile's eyes blazed like fire. He turned toward the square where the people knelt. The ground quaked as water surged closer, flooding into the village paths. Goats bleated wildly, chickens scattered, children wailed. Then the spirit's gaze fell upon Kuma. The young fisherman shrieked, thrashing against his bonds. "Please, I beg you! I did not mean to! Spare me!" But no one moved to help him. Even his own kin turned their faces away. The crocodile roared, and the water surged forward. A massive wave struck the square, sweeping Kuma from the ground and carrying him toward the river. His screams tore the night, but the water silenced him as he vanished beneath the foaming current. The crocodiles swarmed, their bodies twisting and rolling in a frenzy. Blood spread across the water, mingling with the river's eternal flow. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, silence fell. The waters receded. The crocodiles disappeared beneath the depths. Korongwe sank back into the living river, leaving only ripples and a village trembling on its knees. Elder Wokiri raised his staff, his voice hoarse. "The spirit has judged. The covenant is restored with blood. But let all remember, never again shall Nyambele break the law of the living river. For Korongwe is merciful only once." The villagers murmured prayers, but in their hearts burned both fear and awe. The river had shown its wrath, and none doubted its power. But as the people dispersed, Okoro lingered at the edge of the square, his eyes fixed on the dark water. Unlike the others, he was not humbled. He was calculating. "If this beast is truly God," he thought, "then whoever controls it would hold power beyond kings." And though his body trembled, a dangerous seed had been planted in his heart. Morning came heavy upon Nyambele. The air was thick with silence. Even the birds seemed too frightened to sing. The villagers moved like shadows, each step careful, as if afraid to disturb the memory of the night before. Kuma's absence was felt everywhere. His mother's wails echoed through the compound, tearing at the hearts of those who heard her. Yet none dared to comfort her openly, for they knew his fate was not cruelty. It was justice. Still, grief weighed on every face. In the council hut, the elders gathered once more. The fire burned low in the center, throwing their tired faces into sharp relief. Elder Wokiri leaned on his staff, his voice hoarse. "The spirit has spoken," he began. "Korongwe has claimed Kuma's life and restored the covenant. But let no one here think the matter is ended. Such anger from the living river does not pass like wind. It leaves wounds we cannot see." Chief Obad, Nyambele's leader, sat with furrowed brows. His frame was broad, his beard streaked with gray, and his eyes carried the weight of a man who had ruled many seasons. Yet even he looked unsettled. "What troubles me," he said slowly, "is not only the wrath of the river, but the gaze of our people. They are afraid. Fear binds them now more than faith. A people who obey only out of terror will break again, sooner or later." Murmurs rose in agreement, but then Elder Delo's sharp voice cut through. "And what would you have us do, Chief? Tell them the spirit is gentle?" Kuma mocked the covenant with blood, and the river answered, "Fear is wisdom when it keeps us alive." Obad sighed deeply, pressing his palm against his temple. "Fear may keep them alive, yes, but it also breeds doubt, and doubt invites betrayal." His gaze drifted toward the hut's entrance, where the stranger Okoro had been seen watching the river. "Already an outsider has walked among us and dared to call Korongwe nothing but beast. Last night should have silenced him, yet I fear it did not." Walkiri nodded gravely. "I have seen his eyes. They are not the eyes of a man humbled, but of one scheming. He is dangerous." "But what would you have us do?" another elder asked. "Cast him out? The river has already shown its wrath. If we banish him, will it not seem as though we fear a mere man more than the spirit itself?" The debate churned like the river's current. Some argued to exile Okoro before he brought greater trouble. Others said to watch him closely, for his goods, salt, beads, and iron, were useful to Nyambele's trade. Chief Obad sat silently, weighing every word, every breath of the council. At last he raised his staff, and the hut fell silent. "Okoro will stay," Obad declared, "but under watch. No man walks freely in Nyambele without respect for our covenant. If he shows defiance again, we will act. Until then, let the spirit decide his fate." The elders bowed their heads. It was settled, though unease still lingered in their hearts. Meanwhile, outside in the bright heat of day, Okoro was indeed plotting. He had watched the villagers tremble before Korongwe, seen them bow and offer food, even surrender one of their own. And he had felt a thrill, not of faith, but of opportunity. These people are chained to their fear, he thought. They give everything to this beast, even their lives. But beasts can be trapped, tamed, killed if need be. If I find the weakness of their god, then their fear will become my power. Amari, passing by with a basket of firewood, caught sight of Okoro staring into the river, with a strange gleam in his eyes. The boy shivered. Something in his chest told him the stranger was more dangerous than the river itself. He hurried home to tell his sister Zira. She listened, frowning. "We must warn Elder Wokiri. The outsider's spirit is restless. If he angers the river again, none of us will be spared." But Amari hesitated. He knew the elders already mistrusted the stranger. What if they thought he was only imagining things? Still, the boy could not shake the feeling that Nyambele stood on the edge of something greater than wrath, something darker. And in the heart of the living river, beneath swirling waters, the crocodile spirit waited, silent, watching. The days after Kuma's sacrifice unfolded with an uneasy calm. The villagers returned to their fishing and farming, but the river no longer carried the same comfort. Every ripple was a reminder of Korongwe's wrath, every splash a warning that the spirit watched closely. Yet among them walked one whose fear had turned not into reverence, but into restless ambition, Okoro. The stranger's trade goods bought him small favor with some of the villagers. The women admired his beads and the men sharpened their knives on his iron stones. But though they accepted his gifts, none truly welcomed him. They still whispered behind his back, "The outsider does not bow to the river." Okoro, however, cared little for whispers. He spent long hours by the riverbank, studying the waters as though they held secrets meant only for him. He watched the crocodiles as they drifted lazily in the current, their golden eyes half-lidded. He noticed how they surfaced at certain times, gathered at certain bends, and seemed to respond to the chants of the priests. "Not gods," he muttered under his breath, "only beasts with patterns. Beasts that can be mastered." One evening, as the sun bled red into the horizon, Okoro walked alone to the sacred grove near the river. The shrine stood silent, offerings of kola and fish arranged neatly at its base. The air felt heavy, as if thick with unseen eyes. Yet Okoro felt no fear, only hunger for the power the villagers had abandoned to superstition. He knelt, not in worship, but in defiance. "If you are spirit," he whispered, staring at the river, "show yourself. If you are God, prove your might. But if you are beast, then you will bend, and I will own the fear of these people." The water rippled. For a moment, a golden eye broke the surface. Okoro's heart raced, but instead of bowing, he smirked. "I will not kneel." The crocodile sank silently, leaving only circles on the water. That night, Okoro dreamed. He stood in the middle of the river, the water lapping at his waist. The moon hung low, casting silver light across the surface. From the depths rose a colossal shadow, the form of Korongwe, eyes burning like twin suns. The spirit's voice thundered in his head. "You dare!" Okoro's knees buckled, yet he forced himself upright. "You are feared because these people are blind, but I am not blind. You are no god. You are mine to conquer." The crocodile's jaws opened wide, the roar shaking the dream world. Yet instead of crushing him, the spirit sank again, leaving Okoro standing, chest heaving, victorious in his own mind. When he woke, sweat drenched his body, but his heart blazed with certainty. He believed the dream was not a warning, but a sign that the river itself had acknowledged his defiance. Meanwhile, Amari and Zira had grown more troubled. They had seen Okoro wandering at night, muttering strange words, his eyes wild with fire. One evening, Amari ran to Elder Wokiri's hut. "Elder," he said breathlessly, "the outsider is dangerous. He does not fear the river. He taunts it. He goes to the shrine not to pray, but to mock." Wokiri frowned, stroking his long beard. "I have felt it too. The air shifts around him like smoke before fire. But the chief has ordered we watch him, not drive him out." Zira, who had followed her brother, spoke boldly. "If you wait too long, Elder, it will not be the chief who decides. It will be Korongwe. And when the spirit acts, it will not only be Okoro who pays, it will be all of us." Her words hung in the hut like smoke. Elder Wokiri nodded slowly, troubled. By the next market day, Okoro's temptation had taken a dangerous shape. He had begun whispering to a few young men of the village, those who felt burdened by the constant sacrifices and fearful worship. "Why bow to the river?" he told them in secret. "Why throw your goats, your fish, your very kin into its jaws? What if I told you the spirit can be killed, and the river made free? Think what power, what freedom, what wealth would follow." Some turned away in fear, but others listened. Doubt, once planted, spread like weeds in fertile ground, and deep within the living river, Korongwe stirred restlessly. The crocodile spirit felt the shifting winds of men's hearts, and knew that the covenant was about to be tested again. This time, not by mistake, but by deliberate rebellion. The rains came early that season. Heavy clouds gathered over Nyambele, pouring sheets of water that turned the pass to mud and swelled the river until it licked hungrily at the edges of the village. Ordinarily, this was a blessing. Floods meant fertile soil, fat fish, and good harvests. But this year the villagers looked upon the swelling waters with dread, for every rise of the river felt like the breath of an angry spirit. Yet even as the people bowed lower in their prayers, one man walked taller. Okoro, the outsider, had begun to draw others into his shadow. It started with whispers, traded in hushed voices when no elder was near. "Why must we always give? Why must the spirit demand blood?" Some of the young men, burdened by the endless cycle of offerings, found courage in Okoro's defiance. They gathered secretly in the night, meeting beneath the raffia palms where the elders rarely tread. Okoro spoke to them with fire in his eyes. "You are not slaves to a river beast. You are men, strong, capable. These crocodiles are not gods. I have seen their patterns, their habits. With spears, nets, and courage, they can be hunted. The power you kneel to can be broken." One youth, named Taro, raised his voice timidly. "But the covenant, if we break it, will the spirit not destroy us, as it did Kuma?" Okoro leaned closer, his voice low and sharp. "Kuma was weak. He fell to fear before he even raised his hand. But I do not fear. If you follow me, you will see that this god bleeds like any other beast. And once it bleeds, its power will be yours." His words struck deep into their restless hearts. Some trembled, torn between tradition and temptation. Others clenched their fists, tasting the bitter fruit of rebellion for the first time. In the village square, meanwhile, Elder Wokiri stood before the people, his staff raised high. "Listen, children of Nyambele," he proclaimed. "The river is restless. The sacrifices we make are not to chain us, but to protect us. Forget this, and the wrath we saw with Kuma will fall upon us all." The people bowed their heads, murmuring assent, but in their eyes hidden shadows flickered, doubt planted by Okoro's poison. Amari watched from the crowd, his small hands balled into fists. He wanted to cry out. "It is the outsider," he whispers, lies in the night. But fear sealed his lips. He knew that even now, some of the villagers sided with Okoro. Speaking openly might bring scorn, or worse. That night he whispered his fears to Zira as they lay on their raffia mat. "Sister, the village is splitting. Some say the spirit is cruel, and they listen to Okoro. What if they rise against the elders? What if they defy the river?" Zira stroked his hair gently, her face grave. "Then the river will rise against them. Amari, remember this. The spirit does not forgive twice. If the covenant shatters again, we will all pay the price." Days turned into weeks. The rains continued, the river swelled, intention knotted tighter with every passing sun. Finally, the breaking point came. One morning, as the villagers prepared their offerings, fish, yams, and a young goat, Okoro stood boldly at the riverbank, surrounded by the youths he had won over. He snatched the goat from its tether and held it aloft. "No more," he shouted, his voice carrying across the square. "We will not feed this beast with our lives and our labor. This goat feeds our children, not the river." Gasps and cries broke out. Women pulled their children close. Elders raised their hands in horror. Elder Wokiri stepped forward, his voice trembling with fury. "Stop this madness, Okoro. You tread on sacred ground. Put down the offering." But Okoro only laughed, his teeth flashing. He slit the rope binding the goat and let it run free into the village. His followers cheered, though their voices shook with the thrill of danger. "This day," Okoro roared, "the covenant ends. No longer will we bow to a monster of the river. If Korongwe is truly God, let him come and stop me himself." The square erupted into chaos. Some villagers fell to their knees, wailing prayers. Others shouted in anger at Okoro, while a few murmured in hesitant support. Children cried, sensing the terror in the air. And then, silence. The river, swollen and dark, seemed to still. No breeze stirred the palms. The only sound was the pounding of hearts and the faint bleating of the freed goat. Elder Wokiri dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead to the earth. His voice cracked as he cried out, "Korongwe, forgive us! The covenant is broken again!" The waters rippled. Something vast shifted beneath the surface, and from the depths a golden eye opened. The moment Okoro defied the river, the world seemed to hold its breath. The freed goat trotted through the square, bleating nervously while villagers froze, their eyes locked on the dark water. Then the river moved, not like ordinary water stirred by wind or rain, but as though a giant heart beat within its depths. Waves rolled outward in circles, and from the center, a massive shape began to rise. Gasps tore from the villagers' throats. Children screamed, women wailed. Even the bravest hunters dropped their spears and fell to the ground. From the living blood emerged Korongwe himself. Larger than memory, larger than fear, the crocodile's spirit rose with scales that shimmered like molten bronze. His jaws opened wide, and the sound that followed was not a mere growl. It was a roar that split the sky. The ground shook. The air grew heavy, pressing down upon every chest. Elder Wokiri flung himself prostrate, his voice trembling. "Spirit of the living river, forgive us. Do not destroy your children for the sins of one man." But Okoro did not bow. He stood firm, his chin lifted, though his followers had already collapsed in terror. His voice rang clear, sharp against the roar of the waters. "You are no god," he shouted. "You are only beast. Today I prove it." With that, he hurled his spear. It flew straight and true, striking the great crocodile's snout with a clang. But instead of piercing flesh, the weapon shattered like brittle wood, scattering useless shards into the river. A terrible silence fell. Then Korongwe's eyes burned brighter. Two suns of rage. His massive tail crashed against the water, sending waves surging into the square. Huts crumbled, mats and baskets floated away, and terrified villagers clung to one another as the flood swallowed their feet. Okoro staggered but did not fall. His laughter rang out, wild and desperate. "Strike me then, beast! Show them you are not afraid!" The spirit answered. In a blur of monstrous power, Korongwe lunged. His body cut through the water like lightning, jaws gaping wide. Okoro barely had time to raise his arms before the great crocodile clamped down, lifting him high into the air. His scream split the village, part defiance, part terror, as the spirit thrashed him once, twice, then hurled him into the depths. The river boiled with frenzy as crocodiles surfaced in their dozens, swirling and snapping. Blood spread dark across the water. The man who had mocked the covenant was gone, swallowed by the very spirit he had sought to conquer. The villagers watched in horror and awe. Many wept. Some fainted. A few of Okoro's followers wailed like children, crying out for forgiveness. Slowly the waters calmed. The great crocodile lingered at the surface, his blazing eyes sweeping across the trembling people. Then, in a voice that seemed to shake the earth itself, he spoke, not in words of men, but in a thunderous sound that filled every heart with understanding. "Once more you test me. Once more I answer. Let no tongue again call me beast, for I am guardian. I am covenant. I am the living blood. Break this bond again, and none shall survive." With a final crash of his tail, Korongwe sank back into the river. The golden glow of his eyes vanished beneath the current. Silence returned, broken only by the sobs of the people. Elder Wokiri rose slowly, his knees trembling, and lifted his staff. "The spirit has spoken," he cried hoarsely. "The covenant stands, but only just. We live by mercy, not by right. Remember this day, children of Nyambele. Remember it forever." The villagers bowed their heads to the ground, voices rising in desperate prayer. The covenant had survived, but their faith had been scarred. And as the rains poured down, mingling with the tears of Nyambele, Amari whispered to his sister, "Sister, will we ever be safe again?" Zira pulled him close, her face pale with fear. "We will be safe, Amari," she murmured, "as long as no one forgets." But in her heart, she wondered if forgetting was the fate of all men. The night after Okoro's death was the longest Nyambele had ever known. No fire seemed warm enough, no prayer strong enough, to banish the weight pressing upon the village. The people huddled in silence, listening to the river's endless voice, wondering if it would rise again to claim them all. By dawn, the floodwaters had receded, leaving behind debris, broken huts, uprooted yam stalks, dead goats, and the lingering smell of fear. Yet the village still stood. Against all odds, Nyambele had survived the fury of its god. Chief Obad summoned the people to the square. His face was weary, his voice rough as he spoke. "Children of Nyambele, the covenant has been tested twice in a single season. Twice the living blood has risen against us, and twice we have been spared only by mercy. This cannot happen again. If we break faith once more, the spirit will not stop at one man or one family. It will swallow us all." The villagers bowed their heads, shame heavy in their hearts. Mothers clutched their children, men pressed their fists to the earth, and even the youths who had followed Okoro wept openly, begging forgiveness. Elder Wakari stepped forward, leaning heavily on his staff. His voice was thin, but it carried the weight of truth. "We cannot undo what has been done, but we can bind ourselves anew. The covenant is not only with the spirit, it is with each other. If even one among us defies the river, all will suffer. From this day, no one stands apart. We will teach our children and their children and their children's children that Korongwe is not beast, but guardian. And let it be known, the man who mocks this truth mocks his own life." A great silence followed, then a murmur of assent rose like the beginning of a song. One by one, voices joined until the entire village was chanting, "Korongwe, we live by your mercy. We live by your blood. We are your people." The sound carried across the river, rising into the trees, echoing against the hills. That evening, the villagers gathered at the shrine. They brought offerings greater than any before. Baskets of fish, gourds of palm wine, yams piled high in woven cloth. Even the children added gifts, a carved toy, a shell necklace, a handful of wildflowers. At the center, Chief Obad knelt and cut his palm with a sacred blade. His blood dripped onto the black stone, staining it red. "With this blood," he said, "I seal Nyambele to the living river. Never again shall we forget. Never again shall we doubt." The elders followed, then the men, then the women. Even Amari and Zira, small though they were, pressed pinpricks into their fingers and let drops of blood fall upon the shrine. The covenant had been rewritten, not in fear alone, but in unity. That night, as the village slept, Amari dreamed. He stood at the riverbank, the moon shining bright above. From the waters rose Korongwe, vast and terrible, yet calm. The spirit's golden eyes fixed upon him, and in a voice that shook the dream world, it spoke. "Child of Nyambele, the covenant now lives in your blood. Guard it well, for men forget, and when they forget, they fall. But as long as one remembers, I endure. Protect the memory, and I will protect your people." Amari bowed deeply, his small body trembling. "I will remember," he whispered. When he woke, dawn was breaking, and Zira slept peacefully beside him. He rose quietly, stepping outside to watch the river. Its waters glistened in the light, calm and strong, like the heartbeat of the world. And for the first time since Okoro's arrival, Amari felt not fear, but hope. Years turned to seasons, seasons to generations. Nyambele endured, through drought, through war, through the endless march of time. Outsiders came and went, but the river remained. The people remembered the covenant, and though some whispered doubts in secret, the story of Okoro was told again and again, the man who mocked the living blood and was swallowed by it. At the heart of every telling was the same truth, that the river was not beast nor mere water, but life itself. And as long as the people of Nyambele remembered, the great crocodile spirit Korongwe watched and protected and endured.